Take it over.
Yes, I would love to. I met this gentleman more than 30 years ago when we were both working at the FBI. And the things that struck me then are still the things I love about him now. His intensity, his compassion, his sense of humor, his drive, and his love of nature and taking care of anything that is disabled or needs help. So I will leave the rest up to him. You guys have read his bio in the newsletter, so take it away, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone here. I always love talking about the FBI, and probably even more so this week, given what happened to the two agents in Miami. I think too many times we just take for granted the work that is going on every single day to keep this country and its citizens safe. And we just assume that things are okay. But with those two agents, who left home that morning to just do their jobs, and to have to endure, to have their families endure what they've endured and have had to endure and will endure for the rest of their lives, is a price most of us, I don't think, are willing to take. So I give this presentation in honor of those two agents, and hope and ask that you honor them in your thoughts and prayers, and any other way you can honor these civil servants who go out and do their jobs every single day. So again, thank you guys for being here. I will share my screen. Maybe.
Adam.
Yeah, no, I've got that. I'm just trying to find the presentation.
Oh.
Here it is. All right, hopefully you can see my screen.
Yep.
And I will start, hopefully. Okay, so I've given this presentation before. It's typically in two parts. I talk about the history of the FBI itself in the first part, and then I get into my personal history with the Bureau after that. But I wanted to at least share this portion with you, that we're a relatively old organization. We began in 1908 when the then Attorney General Charles Bonaparte wrote in this letter. It's difficult to read, but he described that he needed a regular force of special agents to be available to investigate certain kinds of cases pertaining to the Department of Justice. And interestingly, the first group of agents came over to what was then known as the Bureau of Investigation, to the Bureau of Investigation from the Secret Service. And in one other interesting aspect of that, Charles J. Bonaparte was the grandnephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, which is kind of interesting. So here's kind of where it all started. Yep, that's me. You could tell I was going to be kind of a butt kicker, because all the butt kickers on the police department had these soft grommet hats, and that was mine. So not a very fierce looking officer. This was 1977 when I joined the Detroit Police Department. And 4 years later, I would be coming to this place, Quantico, Virginia, the FBI Academy, January 1981. We weren't sure if we were actually going to continue to process through the academy, because a new president had been elected, Ronald Reagan, and he wanted to institute a hiring freeze. He also wanted to make it retroactive back to the election. Fortunately, the Supreme Court wouldn't allow that, so he had to make it effective the day of his inauguration, which thankfully was the day after our entry on duty. So I made the cut by one day. This is me at graduation, almost 6 months later from the FBI Academy. and I had some family members with me at the time, and it was all fun. I also learned that Detroit was going to be my first office. And this is the Patrick V. McNamara Federal Office Building in Detroit. At that time, the Bureau was in the top two floors here, the 25th and the 26th floor. They've taken over 3 more floors since that time. So they've got the top 5 offices of that building. And in fact, I think they're in a brand new space now. I believe that happened a couple years ago. But this was where I first went to work. And it was very interesting coming from a police department to the FBI. I learned that I was originally to be assigned to a counterintelligence squad. And of course, when you're on a counterintelligence squad, that involves sitting on wiretaps where you're listening in to conversations, court-ordered conversations. But our wiretap room at the time was also very adjacent, very close to where the criminal wiretaps were occurring. And even though I was assigned to this counterintelligence squad, I was transferred off after 1 week. I never could figure it out until a few years later. And as I found out then, it was because on the criminal side of the house, they were investigating a police corruption case. And they weren't sure exactly where my loyalties lie because it did involve the Detroit Police Department. And they didn't want to take any chances. So they got me off of the counterintelligence squad, which I was not unhappy about. And got assigned to the fugitive squad. So one of the things that they did was, as they did with all the Black agents in Detroit, was they wanted to know if I wanted to get some alternate identification. And I said, no, I have no desire to get any alternate identification. In fact, I didn't even really know why they would ask me to do that. And it was essentially because they were using the Black agents to go purchase drugs in medical clinics and things of that nature. And of course, with Detroit being my home and being on the police department there, there was no way I was going to get involved in that. So I concentrated strictly on fugitives, but even with that, we had a group of agents who worked on fugitives on that particular squad, but they all went through one guy. He was a senior agent on the squad. He had the point of contact for the Detroit Police Department's fugitives. And everybody had to kind of work through him, and he would kind of parcel out the fugitive cases that DPD gave to him. So rather than do that, I didn't want anybody's handoffs. I just decided to go to other counties in Wayne, other agencies in Wayne County, and develop my own fugitive program. Interestingly, I just throw this out because it's kind of important. Overall, Blacks in the FBI at the time numbered about 4% of the agent population. So this was a picture of me on the SWAT team. Because of my police experience, they wanted me to join the SWAT team, and I did. Great group of guys here. Had a heck of a good time working with a lot of these guys. This guy, Bill Christian, was actually killed in Washington field office in the mid 80s while he was sitting on a surveillance looking for a murder fugitive, and a guy came up behind him and killed him. So 1982, after being in Detroit for about 18 months, I got sent to Kansas City. And in those days, the Bureau gave you about 30 days to transfer. That means you had to get your house ready to sell. If you had a house, you had to list it. You had to go on your house hunting trip. That typically lasted about 5 days. And you got to make arrangements for housing on the other end. So obviously 30 days wasn't very long. So never enough time for spouses to travel along with you. And it was a hardship for agents to do that. Many of them ended up leaving their spouses behind while they got settled into the new office. So in Kansas City, I was assigned to the newly formed drug squad because we had been given concurrent jurisdiction. Pardon me, I'm having some earplug issues. we've been given concurrent jurisdiction with DEA earlier. So that was interesting. The idea was to go from a big office to a small office to gain experience. And initially, I was assigned to white collar crime matters, particularly fraud against the government. And again, we had concurrent jurisdiction with the DEA then. And so, even though I was assigned to white collar crime matters for my first few months in Kansas City, I ended up getting transferred to this new drug squad consisting of myself and three other agents. And most of my time was spent in Lawrence, Kansas, where I learned uh, Lawrence, Kansas was a very big breakout point for substantial quantities of cocaine. While I was in Lawrence, I got to work with some really good detectives. They had a two-man crew out there that I worked with. And over the course of the next 18 months, I got to work with them in putting together um, a very good drug case against some Colombians who were trafficking cocaine in Lawrence, Kansas through Miami and Colombia. And we eventually ended up utilizing wiretaps to charge 8 people in that case, including 2 Colombians. Lawrence, interestingly, had an applied English center at that time at the University of Kansas, and it attracted kids from all over the world, but in particular Colombia. Can you all hear me? Okay. Okay, great. I'd like to put this quote up here because this is one of the guys I worked with, Carol Crossfield. He was a great guy. I loved working with him. He was just a big old country boy, and I remember driving around the city when I first got out there with him, and he pointed out a house on a hill, and he said there was a guy out there cutting the lawn, and it was a huge house. But he said that there's the chief, and I said, "Oh, the chief lives there?" And he said, "No, no, he's the one cutting the lawn." So, apparently, the chief had a nice part-time gig doing that. Anyway, a couple of years later, I ended up going right back to the Detroit office, and I was assigned to the property crime squad there. Uh, but again, the expectation was that we would follow the senior agents on the squad. And we were working, the property crimes was responsible for primarily interstate transportation of stolen motor vehicles, thefts from interstate shipment, interstate transportation of stolen property. And we had a couple of senior agents on that squad who kind of ran things. And while that was nice, my experience in Kansas City had um, let me know that there were sensitive investigative techniques that we could use to try to address systemic crime. And rather than rely on cases that were given to me, what I did was I met with the insurance companies to determine what their most significant problems were. And the top three insurers at the time, AAA, State Farm, and Allstate, all told me that their biggest problem was automobile theft insurance fraud. They knew that people were fraudulently reporting their cars stolen, but they didn't know really what to do about it. So I developed some informants in that area, a couple of people who ran junkyards, and I set up an undercover operation that would essentially involve us taking people's cars, people who wanted to get rid of them, and would tell us on tape that they wanted to get rid of their cars. Uh, we required that they provide us with the title and or registration for the car. And then we would ostensibly take it to Ohio to get it chopped up and make it go away. As a result of that undercover case, this was really the largest automobile theft insurance fraud that was investigated, really in the history of property crimes. We ended up charging 170 people, including several police officers and a couple of attorneys in this car theft thing. Almost all of them would report that their cars were stolen in Detroit. but more than half of them lived outside of the city of Detroit, but they knew that their cases wouldn't be investigated. So essentially what would happen is we would get the car, we would get the title, we would mark it, we would give it back to them, they would report it stolen, and it was a fairly straightforward case. The biggest thing was just rounding up everybody on the day of the arrest. Most importantly for me, though, uh, this is the kind of stuff the FBI does, I think, better than anyone else. The next year, reported automobile theft in Detroit decreased by 30%. As a result of this case, I was actually promoted to a white collar crime squad, a property crime squad first, but then after a few months got transferred to a white collar squad where we worked primarily financial institution fraud. Now, as a result of working for about a year on that financial institution fraud squad, and having worked wiretaps and undercover investigations, I wanted to do something different, and decided to throw my name in the hat for a management position at FBI headquarters. And that's what this building is. This is the J. Edgar Hoover building in DC. And in the Bureau, there's essentially two ways to get a promotion. You can get a field promotion, which I had already gotten in Detroit, or you can, as a regular agent, put in for jobs, apply for jobs in management positions at headquarters. Being at headquarters is like no other job. I did apply for a job in the financial institution fraud unit at headquarters, took a lateral transfer to headquarters, and began working in that financial institution fraud unit. Interestingly, when you're in the bank fraud area, you get these things that are called criminal referral forms, and they're typically 2 pages that the banks produce. And Joy, I'm sure you know a lot about these. When I got to headquarters, really literally my first week there, I received this criminal referral form from the Resolution Trust Corporation. And as you can see, it's from addressed to the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Arkansas. And this criminal referral form was 29 pages long. But they at one point, they talk about the Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan. And they talk about individuals, as you can see, between February 1984 and July 1987, James B. McDougal, Susan B. McDougal, Lisa Anspach, Jim Guy Tucker, who was a former governor, Stephen Smith, Bill Clinton, Hillary Rodham Clinton, other individuals who are as yet unidentified, were principals in the Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan. So when you get a criminal referral form in that list who was the Democratic nominee for president at the time, Bill Clinton, and you get this in September of the year in which the election is going to be held, that November, naturally you have to coordinate these things with the Department of Justice. And that's where I walked across the street with my boss to the Department of Justice, met with a gentleman by the name of Bob Mueller, who was the assistant AG for the time, in charge of white collar crime. And he very wisely directed us to do whatever kind of investigation we could do that would not interfere with the election. In other words, we could do things in kind of a covert way, getting records, but no subpoenas were to be issued or anything like that, because he didn't want to do anything that could unfairly tilt the election. And that was established DOJ policy at the time. So based on that meeting with Bob Mueller, we sent this communication back to Little Rock. I spoke to the supervisor back there and essentially instructed them that they could do regular routine investigation, but in no way, shape, form, or fashion should it be made public. And this case went on forever. Of course, this was the Whitewater case. I ended up having to provide testimony many times regarding the Bureau's work on this over the course of the next few years. I gave several depositions to different committees, testified before the Senate Whitewater Committee, and learned quite a bit. I got to sit next to a manacled Webster Hubble, and it was quite an interesting experience that went on for several years. And it was so interesting for me because I was a lowly GS-14 supervisory agent at headquarters. All of the other people who testified before the Senate Whitewater Committee were senior executives. We had the U.S. Attorney from Arkansas. We had the former SAC from Arkansas. They were all higher ups. None of my bosses were contacted. So anyway, we got a new director. Louis Free came in and wanted to downsize headquarters. He felt like there were too many agents pushing paper at headquarters, and he offered voluntary demotions for people who could pick the office they wanted to go to. I wanted to get back to Detroit. It was home. My folks weren't getting any younger, and I thought this is a great opportunity for me to get back to Detroit. And it was a little hard at first going from a manager back to an agent again, but it was so important because it taught me, sensitized me to the experiences that an agent has to go through. And that is, actually writing paper, actually writing your investigative reports that are called FD 302s in the FBI, and then having to provide testimony again, having to develop informants. So that sensitized me to being, I think, a better manager. And I was eventually promoted again based on some work that I did as an agent on the Oklahoma bombing investigation. I was part of a team of 4. Our role in the Oklahoma bombing case, of course, was that we had to investigate Jim Nichols, Terry Nichols, Tim McVeigh, and the farm that those guys periodically visited and blew things up in near Decker, Michigan. And that working on that Oak bomb case gave me the opportunity to get involved in management again. So it's interesting. Being a manager in the FBI is not what it always appears to be. You not only have a responsibility for the cases, we have to look at every agent's cases every 90 days, sometimes more frequently, depending on the case. You go through case reviews, file reviews, you look at informants. I had one agent who went into a catatonic state, essentially, when I was on the financial institution fraud squad. And as it turned out, he hated women and he hated blacks. So, of course, that didn't make me feel very comfortable. But we got him the treatment that he needed. And being able to recognize those issues in your people is critically important. Meeting with the informants is important. I had an agent on one of the squads that I worked on where it was a relatively new agent. And one of our responsibilities as managers is to contact informants periodically and make sure that things are going as they should be going. I spoke to the informant in this case, and he said things were going well. And I said, well, I know we can't pay you much, but I hope that what we're giving you is okay. And he said, oh, I would never do this for money. But I knew that couldn't be the case because I was literally looking at 3 receipts in his file that said he had been paid $250 each time. And of course, investigation, we ended up talking to the agents who ostensibly witnessed the payments. As it turned out, they really hadn't witnessed this. They signed the informant receipts because they were trying to be good guys, and they didn't really think that the agent was not paying the informant. And the agent was not paying the informant. So he didn't get prosecuted, but he did lose his job. And it was over $750. But those are the little things that you have to do as a manager in the FBI, because we recruit from the ranks of humanity, and we're subject to the same types of impulses that everyone else is. So I became a manager again. I worked on the bank robbery squad. There are certain cases that never leave you. Our squad C4 was the bank robbery squad. This was one case that I supervised when I was on the bank robbery squad in 1997 in the Detroit office. This appeared to be a bank robbery where the individual in the picture at the bottom here on the left walked into a bank and walked in. Everybody, of course, hit the floor. He walked into the manager's office and the assistant manager's office, shotgunned him to death. And then he walked across. As he was walking to the manager's office, another teller was trying to escape. He ended up shooting her. She was not fatally hit, but she laid down and played dead. He walked over her, walked to the manager's office. The manager was hiding under his desk, and he shotgunned him to death. And he then walked around the bank, inside the bank, terrorizing the other tellers who were behind, thank goodness, protective glass, and they could stay concealed that way. And he couldn't get back into the teller area. So he ends up going outside the bank. The police have shown up by then. He walks up to a 77-year-old man who was at the ATM and on his way to see his dying wife at the hospital. And unfortunately, he shot and killed him as well at the ATM. And that's when he was killed by police. We could never understand why he never made any demands for money. But as we found out later, he was involved with the bank manager in some illicit activity. That's where that investigation took us. But that bank, the people, every single employee at that bank was traumatized by what happened that day. We ended up having to provide employee assistance, and the bank actually did it in concert with some people from the FBI to provide the counseling for those people. That bank branch never reopened, and they ended up transferring all the people in that branch. Those are the kinds of things, though, that stay with you. I went to the Oakland County resident agency after serving as supervisor in the bank robbery squad, and being in a resident agency, as they're called, it's just a fantastic experience because I had a team of 17 agents out there. We had responsibility for everything that happens in the county of Oakland, and very different from leading a squad in a headquarters city environment, because again, you have responsibility for everything. In Oakland County, with a population of 1.2 million people, had a lot of things going on. In any event, I was promoted to assistant special agent in charge in Detroit in 2001. And of course, we had 9/11. It changed everything. We stopped being really a criminal investigative agency, and we became an intelligence agency after that. We were reshaped forever by the events on September the 1st. And at the time, when 9/11 occurred, of course, Detroit is very proximate to Dearborn, which has a large Arab American population. We had a lot of investigative leads that happened in Dearborn, and our command post went up for the next 10 months. It was literally all hands on deck for that. Briefly, I just wanted to show you how the Bureau's mission changed in 2001 as a result of 9/11. The mission became to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution of the United States. Our vision was to be ahead of the threat at all times. We were accused, and rightfully so, of not putting together all of the clues that could have helped us prevent 9/11. And I think that's fair criticism. And then, of course, our priorities, number one being protecting the U.S. from terrorist attack. So I ended up going back to headquarters in 2002. Got promoted to the ranks of the SES as head of the executive development selection program. And I got the chance to reintroduce myself to Director Muller because I worked with him every single day while I was back there. I was promoted to Deputy Assistant Director in 2003. And after about 18 months, I began applying for different SAC position jobs. That's every agent's, every manager's goal in the Bureau is to get out. So you're allowed to start applying for these positions. I applied for various SAC positions, SAC being the special agent in charge. This is what you want to aspire to. And I applied for Springfield, Portland, and Louisville, and I finished #1 in all 3 packages, competing against other individuals. So Jenny and I were packing our bags and we were all set to go. We just had to pick out an office. And then the director said, not so fast. He wanted me to stick around for about 8 or 9 months longer. And he said, if you stick around for 8 or 9 months more and work on some programs that we were working on at that time, he would make sure that I got the office I wanted to get. And that office turned out to be Charlotte. I was appointed SAC here in 2002. Charlotte, of course, is really unique in that we have 3 federal judicial districts here. I had about 120 agents, 150 support, 80 task force officers. Of course, with all the banking institutions there, we've got a relatively large Muslim community here as well. Just had really a wonderful time as the SAC in Charlotte. But I got a call about a year on the job saying, hey, we need you to come back to headquarters. And Jenny and I were just not ready to do that. Twice going 2 tours through the headquarters was enough. And we just said, that's enough. And that's when I started looking for a post-retirement job. So I said it was a great experience, except for April 27th, 2005. And Kelly, to your point about attorneys, my principal legal advisor in the office actually ended up being charged by the Inspector General for some criminal activity, false statements that he made on a financial disclosure form. And when the IG came in to arrest him, it was met with just a lot of resistance from the agent population in the office. I had one of the agents come to my office on the morning of his initial appearance and tell me that he and 30 other agents were going to be at this agent's initial appearance in federal district court. And I said, no, you're not going to be there. Not unless you're on leave. You are definitely not going to be there on government time because we have to let this play out. You know how the rules are. You know what the rules are. And so they all did. Literally 30 agents and other people actually ended up taking leave and went to his initial appearance. Well, on that very same day, Jesse Jackson was in town at a Bank of America shareholders meeting, and there was a cross burning at a home, and Jesse got with the media and really accused the FBI of not being here, and so this is what happened on that day when all of these agents showed up at the courthouse. And Jesse Jackson made his statement to the media about the FBI not being. All of this happened on Wednesday, April 27th, 2005. And here I am. I get a call when I'm at the cross burning scene from Director Muller, who's chewing on me about all the agents being in the courthouse on that day. Jesse Jackson is chewing in my other ear about the FBI not investigating this hate crime. Absolutely the worst day in my career in the FBI. I did explain to the director that all those agents were on leave at my insistence, and I assured the Reverend Jackson that we would open a civil rights investigation into the cross burning. So it was a great experience. Just as Jenny and I were preparing to move here, I found these things in my basement. These were just some old placards with my name on them, business cards representing various times in my career, various positions. But this was the most meaningful thing. I got this award from a group of disabled employees at headquarters. One of my jobs when I was deputy assistant director at headquarters was to work with the advocacy groups. And when I found out that we didn't have adequate restrooms for people with physical disabilities, or parking ramps or parking spaces, and little things that could just make their life better. And here we are, a federal agency charged with protecting civil rights and not actually adhering to the letter of the law, let alone the spirit of the law, in terms of providing adequate access to people from the disabled community. Well, they gave me this award because a lot of changes were made at my direction while I was at the Bureau. And then, of course, when I retired in May of 2006, I got this note from some school kids. I told their teacher, make sure that when you're dividing words up that you do them appropriately. But I love this little note. I've kept it. I will treasure this forever. And this is a picture of my son, who in 1982 appeared on the cover of our internal magazine, The Investigator. Just a real quick story here. You never really leave the FBI. My badge number in the Bureau was 2666. I learned that was a badge that had been worn by one of the agents that had arrested Colonel Rudolph Abel of the KGB back in the 50s. And it was a real honor to wear that badge. And then again, this is Jenny and I at the FBI office in Detroit. We had the opportunity, I'm going to bring this full circle back to Rotary, because these are 3 exchange students. This one here is the one who actually lived with us. Her name was Stacey. She lived with us. Caro was from France, and this one was from the US. She was an outbound, but these 2 were inbounds. We loved this. We took them on a tour of the office in Detroit. Of course, I was no longer working there, but you never leave the Bureau. Just a wonderful, one of the best experiences of my lifetime. They are family to me, always will be. And it's all about your family and teamwork and your country. So thanks for the opportunity, folks. I'm sorry for going over a little bit, but I sure appreciate the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Kevin. I cannot even imagine how many questions we all have for Kevin, but it is 12:27. So if anyone does need to head out, Kevin, you'll stay around just a little bit to take questions.
Absolutely.
Okay. So why don't we go ahead, if it's okay, why don't we go ahead and finish our meeting, and then Kevin can stay after for questions so that we keep within that hour. And just a really quick thing, everybody. The Rotary International incoming president has announced the presidential theme for 21-22, which is to change lives. In that theme, I just wanted to remind everybody that there are volunteer opportunities. 217, we've got our board meeting. 29 Medicist, 223 Medicist, 218 Second Harvest Food Bank, and 220 Adopt a Street. So check out those volunteer service opportunities. And I believe it's time for our 4-way test. Everybody ready? We're going to get it right this time. All right. Of all the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth?
The truth.
Second, is it fair to all
concerned?
3, will it build goodwill
and better friendships?
4, will it be
beneficial to all
concerned?
And 5, with these.
Will it be fun? Yay.
So enjoy some fun on the 14th. Look out for that social opportunity, and please stay on and chat with Kevin if you have any questions about his great presentation and his service at the FBI. And thank you guys all for joining. I believe we are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly.
Retire.
Good job, Kelly.
Thank you.
Great meeting, Kelly. Great meeting.
Thanks,
Thank you, Kelly.
everybody.
Great meeting.
Good
Have a
job.
great weekend. Drive safely today. And if you'd like to actually put your questions in the chat for Kevin, I think you could probably, I know I've already put one in there.
Or if people just want to raise their hand, it may be easier just getting
Okay.
people to ask the question.
That's fine. Let's see. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask Kevin a question.
Gene has a question.
And if you sure. Yes.
Oh, Gene,
Okay, thank you,
Go
Kevin.
ahead.
How much, what was the entire territory of the Charlotte office that you were in charge of? What was
The
it?
entire state of North Carolina.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I heard that before.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Good.
And I can attest to you that there are no straight roads in North Carolina. Nothing. You look at a map and you see the distance from here to Raleigh. You think, piece of cake. No, it's forget it. And then going out on the East Coast
Crow
is
flies,
ridiculous.
Kevin. As the crow flies.
As a crow flies.
Kelly,
go ahead,
oh,
David.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Kelly.
I was just going to ask a question about how does the FBI protect the mental health of its agents? Because you guys, some of the things that you talked about today would have given anyone post-traumatic stress disorder. So how do they take care of your emotional state?
Well, we have counselors available, employee assistance programs for a number of things, but we do have mental health professionals at our offices, and agents have access to those.
Is it required after anything specific?
Yes,
or just
yes,
optional?
it's required. It's required after shooting incidents. Yes, it's required after shooting incidents.
Who's next?
I have a question. Maybe this is just hearsay, but they say that before the 9/11 attack happened, the FBI had information that was about to happen a few years before.
There was no specific information about the attack itself, Amarja, but there were a number of clues that would have led reasonable people to believe that an attack was being planned. And that was the criticism. As I said in my presentation, I think it was fair criticism, actually. We had the pilot training that took place in Minneapolis, and there were other clues about the possibility of terrorism occurring that we simply didn't, we didn't connect the dots, as everyone has said. And I think it's fair criticism. So that's why our mission changed, our priorities changed post 9/11. We became more of an intelligence gathering agency at that point, and everything relative to terrorism got funneled into intelligence groups for analysis and assessment and action if necessary.
Quanta's hand is raised.
Hi, Quanta.
Yes. Hi. I was wondering, I know this is very contemporary. Do you think that FBI should have or could have some information to prevent what was happening on January 6th in Washington, D.C.?
It's hard to say. I think there were a number of factors at play there. One of the biggest problems with anything dealing with DC is that it's very territorial. So while the FBI and other intelligence agencies may have had some information about that, I'm not clear as to whether or not there was any information indicating that there was any violence being planned. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. It's just conjecture on my part. But I think you've got just, not just the territoriality that's going on there. You've got kind of an assumption that because of the groups that were involved, there wouldn't be any violence. And the Capitol Police and their managers have actually said this. They felt like they could have handled it on their own. And unfortunately, they were just not prepared to it. They haven't had any training in those types of situations because, frankly, no one's tried to storm the Capitol in over 200 years. So, yeah, there may have been intelligence, but I'm not sure if more could have been done.
Tyler I guess it's Tyler has your hand raised.
Hi.
Hey, so I wanted to ask a question too. Based on
I guess what you've been hearing from friends as well. Do you see the FBI maybe taking a switch of focus to focusing more on domestic terrorism going forward?
Absolutely.
Because I remember, I was getting my PhD, and I remember during the Obama era, there started to be a significant increase in white extremist groups, militia groups. And I remember, I think the FBI actually put out a report and got slammed for it by certain politicians because they were pointing out, hey, there's all these right-wing groups that are popping up. And so it kind of went silent for a while. But what we've seen since the Obama era is that the numbers have just exploded.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I do wonder if we're going to see a significant shift from maybe foreign terrorism to domestic terrorism. Do you see that to be likely under the Biden administration?
Yeah, I don't see it as a possibility. I see it as a probability.
Okay.
There's no question that there will be an emphasis on domestic terrorism. The only question is how they're going to address it. The Department of Homeland Security, not the Department of Homeland Security, but the Homeland Security Committee in the House is actually holding hearings right now on domestic terrorism. And there's some discussion as to whether or not there's new legislation necessary, or if the current laws will suffice. I think the fact that we've had, and what would be, I think, the primary impetus for this is all of the attacks that we've seen on not just the US Capitol, but what happened in Michigan, what has happened in other places is a real indicator that these groups are becoming more organized. They have certainly access to weaponry, and they've shown that they have a proclivity to use them. So I think Congress, nothing could have gotten their attention more than what happened on January the 6th. And I think that there will definitely be an effort made to make domestic terrorism the priority it should be. I think everyone agrees to that. Director Wray testified last year in front of Congress that, people were talking about Black Lives Matters and Antifa. His position was, look, Antifa is not even an organization. It's an ideology. Black Lives Matter is not a violent organization. What is violent are the domestic terrorist groups, the white supremacist groups, and he testified to that in front of Congress. Of course, under the old administration, that was not welcome information. And I'm not trying to get political here. I'm just saying that's the way it was. That's the way that the current or the old administration viewed these things, and they just refused to accept that. So yes, to your question, I think that's definitely going to happen, Taylor.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Kevin, I was involved in civil rights movement in the early mid 60s. And our perception at that time is that Mr. Hoover was less than enthusiastic in his efforts to root out problems with those groups. And I was wondering if there was any carryover once you came in as far as how Hoover was perceived in the whole civil rights movement.
Great question, Tom. Hoover he's such an interesting person because he is highly revered by older agents, highly revered. And make no mistake about it. I say this in the first half of this presentation. He did some wonderful things for the FBI early in his career, but under his leadership, I wouldn't have even been hired. He had really harsh views on racial issues, and certainly in the 1960s, with the wiretapping of civil rights activists, I'm not sure that we would see that kind of emphasis on domestic terrorist groups today. He's a hero to a lot of the older agents. I look at him in a more nuanced way. He did some good for the FBI, but I think it's true with almost anyone who's in a position for too long. you reach a point where they're diminishing returns. And Hoover certainly reached that point. That's why we have the 10-year limit now on lengths of terms for FBI directors, because they don't ever, it was no secret, Hoover built up information that he could use against politicians. And it's why he stayed in that position for as long as he did. He literally built up information that we would consider today to be extortionate. So yeah, did some good, but at the end, not so good. And the reason I neglected to mention this, when I left the Bureau, when I started, 4% Black agents. When I left the Bureau, 4% Black agents. Absolutely no movement.
Oh, interesting.
Kevin, question: do you feel like law enforcement is getting politicized around the country? You know, we have ex, sheriffs and ex, agents, everyone running for office, thinking that's a way to, promote themselves after they finish their careers. Do you feel like, and then, obviously the last administration, there was, oaths of loyalty almost that were being required of some of these people. So how does the agency protect against all these outside influences?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ranjit. The first thing is that, as a member of the FBI, you were not allowed to participate in anything even remotely political. There were rules about those types of things. Our job was to be neutral in all things political. Yes, you could vote, but participating on someone's campaign or anything like that, forget about it. Running for office, there's no way you could do that. I think for the most part, police departments and the FBI today, they really try their best to be neutral in these times, but it becomes increasingly difficult when you're drawn into these things and accusations are made about you. We saw so many reputations that were shattered under the old administration that it was heartbreaking. I mean, I worked with Jim Comey. I worked with Bob Mueller. I know these men. I know that these are quality guys. And to see them abused in the way that they were was really bad. And it actually helped to create some factionalism in the organization today. I belong to a couple of retired agents groups, and you can see the factionalism that's there. And it's sad because you never saw that kind of my side or your side or Democrat or Republican while you were on the job. It didn't matter, and it shouldn't matter.
Amazing. Good.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey, I have one last question. One of my old roommates from my 20s showed up in Charlotte just out of the blue. I ran into her in Target, and she said her husband worked for the FBI at the Charlotte location, but was really like hush hush on what he did. And it kind of, she's not allowed on like any social media. So I was wondering if he like investigated white collar crime. How does each office have a kind of a specialty based on the area, or does every office do, they cover the exact same things? But, with all the banks here, is cyber crime and white collar crime an area that Charlotte focuses on more than others? Or can you just kind of talk about,
Sure.
what different locations?
Sure. There are 56 field offices throughout the FBI in the United States, and that includes one in Honolulu and one in Juneau. We have over 300 resident agencies. When I talked about my Oakland County resident agency experience, we've got over 300 of those smaller offices that are essentially satellite offices of the FBI. Here in Charlotte, Charlotte is the field office. There are 11 or 12 smaller resident agencies scattered throughout the state, one in Asheville, one in Wilmington, one in Greensboro. We have a bigger one in Raleigh, but all of the main offices, all 56 offices, all do the same thing. They all have responsibility for those 10 investigative priorities that I shared with you guys. And when we have investigations that overlap into different states, we will send out communications with leads on them for those offices to conduct the leads. And that's how you work across state lines. But yeah, they all do the same thing. And we all have the same roles and responsibilities.
So if there, like, let's say that there was cybercrime, let's just say cybercrime. Does that get investigated where it originates or where the victim is?
It depends. It really depends. And a number of crimes will be investigated based on who has jurisdiction. So for instance, I had a white collar crime case, a public corruption case that was actually declined for prosecution in the Middle District of North Carolina because the U.S. attorney there didn't feel like there was enough evidence to prosecute the case. My agents were really discouraged by it. And they felt like it was a viable case. I looked at the case. I looked at the facts. I went to, I hate to admit this, but I went to the Western District of North Carolina where we had a more aggressive United States attorney. There were some criminal acts that occurred in the Western District, and she took the case, prosecuted the case, and got 4 guilty pleas from the case. So it depends. You have different acts that will create jurisdiction for you, and those cases can be prosecuted wherever there's jurisdiction, wherever you have criminal acts occurring, and you have a willing United States attorney, somebody who's willing to take on the case.
What about these international, like, or even local cyber bullies who are like, you know, I've got 13-year-old boys, and the stuff that I hear, like, there are groups out there trying to get kids to commit suicide through
Sure.
online chatting and stuff. So like, how does the FBI have jurisdiction over internet crime?
Well,
Or-
yeah, and things that are international are a little bit trickier. They can certainly file charges if we have victims here within the United States. No question about that. And they can and do investigate those things, but there's so many of them. You literally have to look at the volume of activity and the egregiousness of the crimes before you can get anyone. Different jurisdictions have different guidelines for dollar losses, for instance. In a financial institution fraud case, when I was investigating bank fraud in Detroit, we had a $25,000 threshold for bank crimes. If you committed a bank crime that was $20,000, forget it. U.S. Attorney's Office wouldn't touch it. In LA, the guideline was $100,000. So it just all, there's only so much bandwidth in the U.S. Attorney's offices. So they have to establish those guidelines to work with. And even, you know, these 2 agents that were killed in Miami, they were working, it's called innocent images. Those are the worst of the worst, because these are guys that are abusing children for sexual purposes. And they were there to execute a search warrant. They weren't going to arrest this dude. They were there to execute a search warrant because they knew he was involved in kiddie porn and violent kiddie porn. But they lost their lives to this jerk.
Okay, Quanta has one more question, and then we got to cut it off because Kevin has tutoring at 1 o'clock.
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, sorry. Well, very quick. Does FBI investigate peace activists, for instance? You know, sometimes there is because I was a peace activist in 1991 when we had when we declared war against Iraq. So I was member of a peace organization at NC State, and then there was always this rumor like peace activists are being investigated, and then I was thinking, under what premises? I mean, what is it that they're doing wrong that they needed to be investigated by the FBI or the SBI, State Bureau Investigation? Is that true or just
And Quana, yes, we have a file on you. No, I'm kidding. No.
I got it. I got the information I needed.
There should never be any investigation of any peace groups unless those peace groups are involved in some kind of violent activity. Otherwise, we're prohibited. The laws specifically, the COINTELPRO laws from the 1980s prohibited that kind of domestic surveillance of people actively or people who are engaged in peaceful activities. Those are protected rights, and we don't investigate peace groups. No, I can't say that for the SBI. I have no idea what they do,
All
but
right,
not the
thank
FBI.
you. Thanks.
Well, thank you guys.
Hey, thank you guys.
Danny and Kevin, you guys have a great time volunteering in a bit. Get those
Okay.
kids to read.
I did mine Tuesday, but he's got his today.
Thanks,
Great
folks.
seeing you guys.
Great seeing you. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.